Well, folks, I figured we'd start with some sissy music for some sissy offense. Oh, my goodness. We're going to be joined by Coach Don Patterson in a little bit, folks. I don't know where to start. I really don't know where to start. All right. That's enough of that nonsense. Iowa defeating South Dakota State 7-3. 7-3. 2 safeties and a field goal. And the Hawks are 1-0. But so much more to dig up from this one, folks. I really don't know where to start. As you can see, this is Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. It's the first one of the year. I was looking forward to being the start of another awesome year here on the show, and I have no doubt that it's going to be a fun one because when you have a great mind like Coach Don Patterson, you can expect the breakdown to be great. Coach Patterson making his way back to his home base to help us break what was an absolutely confusing, disturbing. I don't even know how to describe it. I've never seen a defense play quite. Now, again, granted, South Dakota State's still an FCS team. I understand it. But we talked about it heading into this game that the perceived strength of this Jackrabbits team was the offense. And with that being said, I've never seen an offense or a defense play quite like Iowa's defense played. Because keep in mind, we see teams shutting other teams out, and I understand that. But think about how inept Iowa's offense is right now. And for the Iowa defense to be able to hold South Dakota State the entire game. Let's talk about that first, because everybody accuses me of being negative about the offense. I think understandably so, but I'll change it up for a change. All right. Let's talk about how elite this defense is so far. Now, it's just one game, but I think the fact that Iowa's defense played the way they did today against the circumstances is an absolute indication that this is a group of studs. The defensive line played terrific. That's a really good quarterback that South Dakota State has back there, and he was able to do nothing. He did miss a long throw to one of the Yankee brothers early, which certainly affects things, but just an unbelievable I don't even know how to describe what that defense was able to do today. And certainly we're going to talk about the offense. The call-in line is at the bottom of the screen. I also want to let everybody know we're doing something different this year. Not only can you join the phone, we just got one call line, but you can also join by video. All right. Or you can just join without video. So basically, here's how it works. When Coach Patterson gets here, before he gets here, whenever, you're able to use the link in the description below this video and either have your camera off and we can treat it like a phone call without your camera, without your video on screen, or we can have you're welcome to keep your video on screen as long as you stay PG and things are appropriate. Before we get to our caller on the line that we have here on StreamYard, let's get to our first phone call of the day and first phone call of the postgame season. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Zach from Cedar Rapids.
All right, Zach. What do you got?
Oy vey.
Let's talk about it, Zach.
At least we found out the D is legit and Tory Taylor is still a legit punter.
Fair. Absolutely fair.
Because, yeah, I would say Tory Taylor, game ball, defense, game ball. Everything else is, yeah. offense, I don't. And maybe it was just me. The offensive line looked like they were a second or two behind every snap.
Yeah, the offensive line, that's a huge concern. I think we all convinced ourselves that, oh, well, Linderbaum's gone. Collectively, they'll be better. And I know they dealt with injuries during fall camp. But my goodness, it's just, it's so far, we're one game in. I think we need to understand that. And I don't want to act like this is going to be another repeat of 2009. But remember what happened in 2009? You remember that, Zach.
Uh-huh.
And Iowa forced to block 2 field goals against an FCS opponent at home, wins that game, and then goes 11-2, wins an Orange Bowl. So I think we need to keep things in perspective while also acknowledging the fact that I don't think any of us have ever seen anything quite like what we just saw.
I remember, I forget what year it was. I want to say it was in the mid-2000s when Iowa went to Penn State and won 4-2. I think that was the weekend that one of Kirk's parents passed away.
Okay,
probably one of the worst games I've ever seen. When you pull the plug on Spencer, look, I've tried to be a Spencer defender, but you're missing wide open passes, wide open screen pass he overthrew, and I think the commentator actually said just basically lazy.
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't think LaShawn Williams ran poorly.
No. He had no time to run was the problem.
Yeah, and we heard some criticism. I think it's sometimes fair criticism towards Tyler Goodson last year for kind of pitter-pattering and not being decisive with his runs. But again, I didn't think that was the case today at all. I thought LaShawn Williams ran well, but when you're running into a wall and you're getting beat on the line of scrimmage, boy, you got no chance.
Well, and when they had a couple times where they got, 10 or 15 or 20 yards, then they go into the one receiver, 2 or 3 tight end running back. Well, they're not going to be passing.
Right.
They just make it so obvious. And again, I will just say, props to the defense. The defense, they seem to play with a major chip on their shoulder today. I can tell why they're going to be probably top 10, if not top 5 defense in the country. I mean, South Dakota is not Cupcake University.
I agree.
And
well, Zach, I appreciate the call.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Let's take our next call. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line? Hello. Hello, you're on the air. Nobody there. Let's get to our first StreamYard guest.
Hey. Thanks for having me.
What'd you think of the game, sir?
All right. Well, I'm DTO, and I'm a Hawkeye grad. 1999, used to go all the games. Best college years ever. My dad gifted me this hat, hardcore, diehard Hawkeye, and I happen to live in Costa Rica, so I'm an international fan of our Hawkeyes. And, it was absolutely the fact that we got the defense to continually year after year to show up in the way they have. That's pretty much our team in a nutshell. Would you agree with that?
And by the way, the caller who just called in, I'm going to put you on hold. So if you hear silence, that's why. I would agree with that. And I'll say this. People who, and I hear this on social media all the time, and you get this through this show, and you've heard it, I'm sure, even though you're down in Costa Rica, you're in touch, via social media with the Iowa fan base. Yep. I do hear a segment of the fan base that likes to fall back on, well, this is just Hawkeye football, right? Kirk does things the way he wants to. So that is not Hawkeye football, and that's not how you ever. I don't think any coach in the country wants to do it that way. And if you're going to convince yourself, if you honestly can tell me that you want a game in which your defense legitimately outscores your offense without any touchdowns on either side, literally outscoring your offense with safeties, then maybe you've outaged the game. And look, this is an extreme version of what we've seen over the last several years, minus 2020, which I think was a bit of an anomaly because of COVID.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the booing, I know you didn't bring that up, but I wanted to bring that up early in the showing. Yeah. I think the booing was a result directly of the last 8 months and the decisions that have been made within the program, the decisions that have not been made within the program, and fans just hoping, well, we've got to trust, right? Let's just hold on to this blind faith. We're going to trust that somehow the guys who have not gotten it done here for how long are all of a sudden going to flip a switch, and it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you see that guy in the audience is basically like asleep, the Hawkeye fan. Even we're about to win the game, we just like
second safety. He was asleep on the second safety. He didn't even react on the second safety.
That guy's going to be a meme. I promise you that.
I just, and there, as you know, if you watch my show, you know there are very few times where I'm speechless.
Oh, I think as they were comparing baseball scores, Field of Dreams. Like, what's going on here?
I don't know what to say. Like, I'm watching this, and I don't even know what to say anymore. And until Coach Patterson gets here, I don't really know how to break this thing down other than holy crap.
Yeah, I'm curious what Coach Patterson's going to say about this. I think he's going to be in the stunned state of being. I think our nervous system is just kind of out of whack right now. That's the opening game. What's happening? Like,
well, I'll say this:
the rest of the season.
Coach Patterson is the epitome of never get too high, never get too low. So I would anticipate that he's going to be very pointed. He's not going to be the one thing. Coach Patterson, I know he's going to be frustrated, and I'm guarantee you he's frustrated. But one thing about Coach Patterson is he will make everybody feel a little bit more positive. So there were good things today. There were good things today. I mean, they were just about no good things on offense. I didn't see. Besides, I thought again, LaShawn Williams ran the ball well at times.
Yeah, the running game. Where was it? Yeah, LaShawn just started to bring it up. Started making some yardage, but before I was like. Because I went to school, I was a college kid in the stands, like watching Tim and Dwight just make electric plays. And, I'd love to have some offensive electricity happen. And as the other caller just said, it was like the commentator's pretty brutal. Like it was just lazy. And, and they were also complimenting the other team's quarterback of like, he's poised, he's he's steady. And it's like, yeah. So let's hope that Coach Patterson can bring some hope and some optimism for us Hawkeye fans. I'm actually in a few Hawkeye groups on Facebook, and one of them is super clearly named like positive Hawkeye fans only, because if you go to the other ones, it's a stew of chaos. But I guess, as you said, maybe this is the new era of Hawkeye football where, even last year, I think we got surprised, but, this schedule is going to be pretty tough with the major, top 10 teams that we're going to be playing. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Like I said to the other caller, and this is the last thing, and I do appreciate you calling in all the way from
You're welcome.
I hate to bring up 2009, but it is a fact that I remember watching that game like it's yesterday. And I remember thinking, holy crap, like we're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so do I believe that there's reason for sound hope? No, but I also know that this team under Kirk Ferentz, and I'm talking not just this 2022 edition, but just this program is one of the most bipolar programs at times. I even bring up 2016 where they go on the road and get absolutely throttled to a Penn State team at night and then come back and beat a top 5 Michigan team at home. It does happen. Now, granted, it's hard to really rate what happened today because I don't know that even Don Patterson or I have a good gauge on the South Dakota State defense. Neither of us felt like it was their stronger side of the ball. Yeah, but we also acknowledge the fact that South Dakota State is one of the best programs in the FCS, probably the second best behind the Bison program. So,
yeah, especially when their tight ends playing. Think about that one.
And he was out.
I know that's my point. So I was like,
he was their best player.
Exactly, and with him out of the game, I'll quote my brother as we wrap up here. He, coming up for next week with Iowa State. He always says Iowa State has one game in mind year round. It's to beat the Hawks. So I know they're going to come at us pretty hard next week after watching. Minimal results.
I will say today. One thing about that game, without even thinking about Iowa's offensive struggles today. Iowa State will have not been tested. They play Southeast Missouri State because my understanding is because of a connection between Matt Campbell and the coach down there. So advantage Iowa as far as being battle tested because that's a good South Dakota State team. That is a good South Dakota State team that Iowa beat today. I know some people will laugh at that because they're FCS, and I get it. But that is a good South Dakota State team. So Iowa will have been battle tested. They say the most improvement goes from week 1 to 2. I don't know what else to say other than you just hope that's the case because, boy, I didn't see much of any improvement in any of the areas that needed to be improved from 21 to 22. Not in the area of pass protection, not in the area of run blocking, not in the area of quarterback play, certainly wide receiver play. It's hard to evaluate when you're just ransacked by injury.
Yeah.
But again, I just didn't see anything that made me believe that there are big changes down the line. But
they always say champions are made in the offseason. I'm like, what the hell happened in the offseason?
Yeah, and I don't want to hear that the offensive line is young. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm done hearing that. We heard that last year. Well, Mason Richmond's young. Nick DeYoung's young. Connor Colby's young. Okay. So they're still young. And so eventually, we said the same thing about, Cody Ince, Kyler Schott, those guys, and they're gone. They've let Cody Ince gives up football. Kyler Schott graduates. So at some point, these guys have to be coached, and certainly in the offseason, you would expect the strength and conditioning aspect of things to improve. And I hope, don't mean to bring up Chris Doyle. I don't think you can, but you have to wonder the Chris Doyle departure, how much it's affecting Iowa on the interior, especially the interior of that line, just with run blocking, because Iowa gives a pretty hefty raise to Raymond Brathwaite during the offseason. You just wonder now, is the Chris Doyle departure starting to catch up to Iowa from a strength standpoint? That's a conversation we can have.
Yeah, and the leadership, right? That's what's about on the field. Like when you have that synergy and you have players that can step it up and take it to the next level and really find their edge and go beyond it, that's what it comes down to. And I feel, obviously the players that are no longer at the team, it's like, who's going to step up? Well, I'll close by showing you some awesome views of Costa Rica.
Oh, man.
So there's a Hawkeye.
Beautiful.
Come on down anytime.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate you listening and being a part of the show. We'll be here all year, sir.
I love your YouTube channel. I've been subscribed around the time you launched it. So
appreciate it, man.
You're welcome.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Appreciate the call. And Costa Rica, man, great to see. I got some family down in Costa Rica. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. Let's get to our caller who's been patiently waiting on hold. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. This is Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Yo, what's up, Corey? It's Hawkeyes.
Hey, Hawkeyes. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, man? Yeah, nothing much. Just chilling. I wanted to say this, though. In West Lafayette, Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy are laughing, which is just so sad.
Well, and let's be honest, Tyrone Tracy didn't play that well on Thursday, but he certainly played better than any other receiver on the Iowa roster today.
Yeah, just really sad, honestly. I mean, it was like, at least we got the win, but honestly, I think you have to alternate snaps between Padilla and Petras next week. I mean, you have to, otherwise you'll lose. I mean,
well, but do you really believe the answer is Alex Padilla? Are we or do we have a belief that the answer is Alex Padilla right now?
Well, I think you have more of a spark there than you have with Petras. I mean, what choice do you really have to try out Joe Labas? And it would have been the best time to do it this week rather than next week. But I'm really worried, like, for the future of this program. I mean, we're looking at a bad year on offense if we don't make a change.
I understand, but this is what I'll say, and I know fans, we have about 300 people between our two channels that are listening right now. Appreciate everybody being here. We're awaiting Coach Patterson here in a few minutes. We're taking your calls, taking your chats and questions as best I can. You guys have been great so far interacting, but I'll say this, that I'll say it one time, and I'm not going to promise to only say it one time because it could very easily come up later. Transfer portal. That's all I'll say. I know I sound like I'm beating that drum to death, right? I sound like a broken record, but Iowa refused to go to the transfer portal to support the quarterback position during the offseason.
All summer, and I was too. I mean, I said, "Oh, Corey's going to give Spencer a chance." I think we all should, and I guess that didn't work. But I agree with you on the transfer portal.
Best group of quarterbacks out there. Now, it's not just. I'm not implying it's just quarterback play. The offensive line was really bad today. I get it. But it's when you have several issues, multiple, I said this all of last season, multiple problems require multiple solutions. And right now, Iowa does not have multiple solutions. It doesn't even seem like they have a solution because all of the aspects that I saw today, observed today, were pretty consistent with what we saw most of last year.
And I have a question for you. Do you think, we all know Ferentz is pretty headstrong. Do you think there's any chance that until you find a solution, you split snaps? Like, what would you do personally, and what do you think the coaches will do?
I would go through every quarterback on my roster and see if one of them can light a fire. Now, here's the deal. Listen, I am in no way endorsing Kirk Ferentz as a QB's guru or a guy who's good at evaluating QB talent, because I think clearly that's not the case. That's just not, and that's fine. Not everybody has that as a strong suit, and that's why I believe you go hire someone who actually understands the quarterback position, which Iowa did not do when they had an opportunity. So there's a criticism. But I would say if I'm in Kirk's position, I am going to exercise every option I have in September, Because if you say, well, let's just keep, the motto from Kirk Ferentz, what I expect Kirk Ferentz to do is we just got to keep working. And here's the deal. Iowa could improve a little bit from week 1 to week 2 and beat Iowa State. And then Nevada's not great. You beat Nevada. And I think they could win at Rutgers because of the defense. And you're 4-0 and you're going to fool yourself. Because then Michigan comes calling and, Ohio State comes calling and then Wisconsin comes calling. And all of a sudden you're, 5-4. So I believe the answer is to pull out all the stops, but I don't see Kirk Ferentz doing that personnel-wise. He's had all year to do that, and he hasn't done it during the offseason when it actually would have made sense to do it. Like I said, with the portal, or at least opening up the option of the possibility of Joey Labus potentially giving you a spark, and he never did that. So I don't expect a change in that regard. You just got to hope that this was an off day. But I don't think it was.
Yeah, let's hope so. Really, really, really sad. The really poor offense. I mean, you get a whole summer to work out, and you can't even turn that around. I mean, everybody should be running sprints. They should be running suicides. It's just really pathetic. But I appreciate all your coverage, Corey. All summer, it was just great. So thank you for everything you do, man.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you, sir. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.
Peace. See you later, man.
Appreciate the call there. And now we welcome Alex to the show. Alex, you've been patiently waiting. Appreciate you calling in.
Thanks, Corey. This is Alex from Cedar Rapids. I don't know if I can match Costa Rica. I'm just in my bedroom, but
it's okay. What's the tropical climate of Cedar Rapids doing?
Balmy, 75 degrees, chance of thunderstorms.
Right about what it is right here in the center of AIM. So did the game look any better on your screen than it did on mine?
No, I have a 76-inch TV with surround sound, and it was still just as bad as probably a 12-inch TV. So before I kind of go off on a tirade, do you know anything on Justin Jacobs? He went out, he made a play on, made a tackle, got a tackle, went out and looked like he was holding his side, but they didn't hear if any update on him. Didn't see him back on the field. So hopefully maybe it's just a stinger bruiser and he'll be back for Iowa State, because I think we'll need him. But starting with the positives, this defense is amazing, and I don't think anyone can say any different.
I agree. I know Tom Kakert tweeted out, because of course he was there covering the game, that Justin Jacobs was seen in street clothes in the second half. That's not a good sign. However, he was out there, so that's a better sign than not seeing him at all. I think Iowa's. I'm agreeing with you. They could certainly use Jacobs against Iowa State. And let's not remember, he had his coming out party against Iowa State last year, defending those big tight ends, and of course created the huge strip of Breece Hall that turned into a Jack Campbell touchdown. So that's certainly a case can be made that they need him desperately next week. But I think they're deep at linebacker, because all three of those guys missed a lot of time in the spring. Guys like Logan Klemp and Jay Higgins, and I think Kyler Fisher, those guys, I'm not concerned about depth there, but you're right. That certainly would help. And as far as the defense is concerned, yeah, I can't praise the defense enough. I thought the secondary was, I'm not trying to critique John Stiegelmeier, but if I was John Stiegelmeier in that offense, I would have probably tested Iowa's corners a little bit more than they did. But honestly, when they did, I thought Terry Roberts and Riley Moss responded. And let's recall, too, that Jamari Harris was out in this game because of the OWI. So I was impressed with Iowa's defense all around. The one question mark I had was safety. And if you've heard my stuff, you've heard me say that. And I thought Iowa got burned. Kayvon Merriweather got burned once or twice. Very fortunate that one of the Yankee brothers did not score on that deep ball in the first half. But in general, I'd say the defense deserves an A+.
Well, and you forgot to mention one guy, which is Quinn Schulte, who's a walk-on, who I think played extremely well. I know Kirk Ferentz said that Xavier Wampa will see the field at some point, but I mean, Quinn Schulte looks like to be dealing right now. So I keep him in. He seems like, he has an eye for the ball and, hits pretty hard too. So I was very impressed with Quinn Schulte's performance, today, and he comes actually from my high school where I graduated from Xavier here in Cedar Rapids. So, bit of homerism, I guess, but and also Tory Taylor. I mean,
let me just say this real quick before you get to Tory Taylor. Coach Patterson texted me during the game and said Quinn Schulte looks like Jack Kerner, and that's high praise from Don Patterson, because he was a big fan of Jack Kerner, who is a real sure tackler, undersized like Quinn Schulte is, But no, I agree. He was great, and that's big because that was probably my biggest question mark was who's going to nail down that free safety spot. Was it going to be Wampa? Was it going to be Schulte or Bracey? And I thought Schulte played great.
No, and Torrey Taylor, was just dropping dimes, and him and Cooper DeJean, it was kind of cool. They were like locking eyes as they were punting, and they were just, it's like the bromance of Torrey Taylor and Cooper DeJean. That was, and unfortunately, after this game, it's obviously getting to the negative territory. I do not feel confident in this team. I'm pretty optimistic about my Hawkeyes and think, I was saying this offseason, this offensive line has got another year under it. It'll be better. Yes, we did lose Tyler Linderbaum to the NFL. But everything else around him should be okay. And then we've had some injuries. Wide receiver, I think that honestly showed up more today than I think people really would have thought. And credit to South Dakota State's defense for really, playing they played a great game. There's no way around it, but there's no excuse for how Iowa's offense played. Very, very poor run blocking. Plus, I think the pass blocking was a little better from the previous year. The problem is, and beating the dead horse, is Spencer Petras. He looked horrible. Like everyone was saying, like, oh, in camp, when he went to the Manning camp, and everyone was saying this guy is the real deal. He has improved. He's improved his footwork. He's improved. He's trimmed down. He's a little more mobile. And we did see him, run, escape the pocket and slide. That was kind of a pleasant surprise. But as a coaching staff, when you evaluate this and you see how poorly the offensive line played, does Padilla give you the best chance? Because he is a mobile quarterback. Now, he may not have the best arm. I think Spencer Petras has a bigger arm than Alex Padilla, but Padilla has the mobility. He has that dual threat capabilities where Spencer Petras doesn't. And if this defense, like last year, they're selling out against the run, making Spencer Petras beat you. If that's the same case this year, I was pretty high on Iowa. I said they're probably not going to go worse than 8-4. But man, now I can barely see 6-6 out of this. Nevada, Rutgers, I can see as wins. There's 3 there, and I think, knowing Iowa, they'll probably get another 3 wins. Illinois, Northwestern. But where's that last one come from? But this offense, I understand. In 2009, we had the 2 block punts against UNI to win that game, and we end up going to the Orange Bowl. Difference is we actually had a decent offense behind Ricky Stanzi. So,
well, let me just say this, and I'm not trying to argue with you, but let's remember that game, I don't think Iowa, what was the score of that game?
It was 17-16. I looked it up before I came on because I know you mentioned it.
So my point is, I'm not. You're right. This offense was worse than that, but that offense didn't light the world on fire against you and I. No,
but it was more of an offense than what we saw today.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and I know I try to be a Petras defender. I was like, give him the chance. He's worked all off season. You got to trust the coaches. But after what we saw today, does he really give you the best chance? Like, that's a question that has to be asked. Does he really give you the best chance? Is Alex Padilla that much worse than Spencer Petras? Now, some people will say Brian Ferentz's play calling. I didn't think his play calling was that bad. I mean, there were some questionable runs that I didn't care for, but it was really Spencer Petras just not executing. That was the big thing I took away, is that there was some wide open wide receivers. He overthrew everybody. Last year, you could kind of, give him a little break because it seemed like a lot of the receivers were dropping passes. Right. But this time it was all on him. He overthrew a lot of wide receivers. Sam Laporta is a big dude, and he overthrew him, I think, twice, 2 or 3 times. It's like, how do you overthrow a guy that size? So,
but to me, and not to argue with you, but I saw the same thing last year, and I saw the same thing in 2020. That's been Spencer's trademark and his big issue. And he's even talked about that. He talked about that in the offseason. When he doesn't set his feet, when his mechanics aren't right, he makes bad throws. And it seems like such a such a deep statement to make. It's not deep at all. I think I think Don Patterson would attest to the fact that any quarterback that doesn't set his feet is going to struggle and doesn't get into, I mean, I think the issue with Spencer right now is, the way I can sum it up is, when the lights go on, something's just not there. And it's not assisted by the fact that, he does not have a good offensive line, although in 2020 he did, and they won a lot of games in 2020. Now, he wasn't great then, but in order for him to be a successful Big Ten quarterback, he needs a run game to carry him. And he's not going to be able to climb Iowa out of a subpar run game.
No, but I think with Padilla and you have that threat of a running QB. Now, I'm not saying Iowa needs to go to like an RPO where quarterback runs an option. Maybe have a couple plays in there and make the defense kind of think about it. But if defenses see Spencer Petras, they think, okay, if we can collapse, if we can send some pressure, this offensive line looks a little improved, but nothing like substantial. He's gonna take the sack, and I think that's how defenses. I'm looking at Iowa State is that's how they're gonna beat Iowa. Is they're gonna pressure Petras, they're gonna make Petras beat them. And right now, unless Keegan Johnson comes back, and I think Nico Wargani might be out for the Iowa State game. They said a couple weeks, but obviously it'd be a question. But if Keegan Johnson comes back, maybe gives them another weapon because was there any really deep shots down the field? I mean, I understand pass protection wasn't there for a good chunk at the time, but then when there was no deep shots. And I don't know if it was Petras not trusting the wide receivers or just maybe there was no separation.
I think it's a combination. And I said it doesn't help when you have wide receivers out, but that's not an excuse because so many things are breaking down. You cannot point at one thing. That's why I don't agree with people who say, "Oh, it's just offensive line play. It's just quarterback play. It's just wide receiver play." It's all a problem. Play calling is still a problem. Somebody tweeted out during the game, and I'm not going to say which Twitter account it came from, but somebody tweeted out, "Well, Brian Ferentz has actually called a really good game."
I think I saw that tweet too. I don't know who it was, but I remember seeing that, or someone else said it too.
I am no play calling expert, but I'm going to ask Don Patterson when he gets here. Did you think Brian Ferentz called a really good game? I'm tired of the homerism. It's the fans that continue to defend and defend and defend that enable the offense not changing. That's what it is.
Yeah,
and they sold out every game, and I think it's great that the stadium is full, but they sold out every game despite the fact that the offseason was spent promoting Brian Ferentz to QB's coach. And that is your prerogative as a fan to do that. But I'm just saying, when someone asks, well, why isn't there more leverage to make changes? And I'm not talking about getting rid of Kirk. I've defended Kirk to the grave, and I'll continue to defend Kirk at the grave. I love Kirk Ferentz. I think he's a great head coach. I think he's a great human being, but he's got a blind spot, and it's Brian Ferentz. It's his son. That's the blind spot. And Kirk doesn't know how to coach an offense effectively. That's fine. I mean, I thought he was an O-line guru. The O-line's struggling, but he needs somebody in there who understands offense, who understands play calling, and he doesn't have it. And no. that's just what it is. And it's the people who defend it constantly that enable, because they're the people who are paying for these season tickets. Now, certainly big donors could step up and cause a fuss, but apparently they haven't done it yet.
Well, and I'll finish up here by saying that I think the donors and the boosters, if this trend continues, now this is one game, and there's a lot of people with this, including myself, probably overreacting maybe a little bit, but it's justified because we've seen it now for 2 years. So we have some evidence to say, hey, this isn't getting any better. So yeah, if this trend continues, there has to be a push for some new talent at the offensive on the offensive side of the ball. Now I had this thought. I actually watched the Purdue Penn State game, and I had this thought, and I kind of want to know your opinion on this. So Tyrone Tracy didn't have a great game against with Purdue, but Charlie Jones really showed out. Now, if I'm an Iowa wide receiver, especially after this game, I'm looking at that and going, maybe I'm at the wrong school. And that's what scares me, is that we're not, I think Arlen Bruce is a great asset to us, along with Keegan Johnson. And if we have another year like we did last year where we can't target our wide receivers and get them the ball, what's stopping them? Especially with NIL. I know there's a new transfer rule. They kind of made it a little harder or less desirable to enter the transfer portal. But at some point, you're going to start losing some talent on some weapons on the outside. And then what are you stuck with? So
and last thing, and I'll let you go, Alex, but if you follow me on Twitter, hope you do. But I tweeted out during the game that, anybody who wants to criticize Charlie Jones, you see people, again, it's the same people that defend, find a way to defend the offense, or to find the way to defend Kirk, or find a way to defend Brian. When you have a situation where you're defending Charlie Jones not because he left, because everybody has a right to leave, but when he left after spring, he left us high and dry. If you're Charlie Jones and you're told during the off season before spring practice, Charlie, we're going to make some changes. You're being told maybe the same things that the fans are being told, that there's going to be an open competition, and you go through spring and you go through maybe just take the one open practice that we saw in the spring where there were not equal snaps against equal competition. There was not a fair QB competition, at least not in the open practice. If I'm Charlie Jones, I'm sitting like a fan would I'm sitting here and saying nothing has changed. I came into this spring under false pretenses, and I have the ability to, and I have the right to explore my options. And I don't blame Charlie Jones one bit. If the roles were reversed and Iowa had gotten a star wide receiver, any position late in the summer or spring, Iowa fans would be rejoicing. It's a sad excuse. Charlie Jones made the right decision. Anybody wants to say Charlie Jones was the fourth or fifth best wide receiver on the Iowa team, as I said, they were saying that, Alex.
No, I'm saying he is not. He was. I think he was going to be the number one, if
Correct.
Not number two. If people were saying it's an excuse to try to make him feel better, he was not the fourth or fifth best wide receiver. Definitely not.
Keegan Johnson or Arlen Bruce, but I'm just saying that's an excuse. And now we're seeing I understand Purdue throws the ball all over the yard, and that's a different offense. But what we saw from Charlie Jones Thursday was impressive, and what we saw today is self-explanatory. Alex, appreciate you calling in, sir. And
that's I guess put a face to the name, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some Petrus defenders. I really am, and I'm really I want to hear a good argument outside of he won us 12 games. That's not a valid excuse anymore. I want to hear why he needs to be our starting.
Never been a valid
But
excuse.
again, I'll keep watching. Thank you for taking my my video chat, Corey.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. And just so everybody's aware, we are awaiting Coach Don Patterson. Here's how it goes, folks. The link to join the show is in the description below. All right. Coach Patterson is going to be joining us soon. Very, very soon. I would say within the next 10 to 15 minutes would be my guess. And so stick right here. We're taking your calls, taking your chats. If you call in, and we've got another call on the screen, then just hang tight. I'm going to put you on hold. Don't hang up. We've only got one line plus the video chat. We can have as many people in the queue on the video chat as possible. But again, if you call the number, which is at the bottom of your screen, 515-635-1601, I'm going to put you on hold until we get somebody off the video screen. So let's go ahead and get to our next caller. It's Vincent. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Corey, how you doing?
I am here.
Right. Yeah. Just to start off, you kind of hit on a lot of the topics I was going to touch on myself when it comes to this is the same offense as last year. Nothing's changed whatsoever. It's the same. We're having the same issues. There's nothing that's improved. There's no revamped offense, or there's nothing that's given us any hope moving forward. But I guess for me, what's more concerning is there's lots of things that are concerning, but the offensive line play was as bad. It was much worse than I thought it was going to be. And you even said yourself, hey, it's not using we're young as use anymore. It's just bad offensive line play. And
Agreed.
Coming from a guy that's notoriously been able to churn offensive linemen into the NFL, here we are still having these same problems. It's just extremely concerning. And then the same thing with Brian. Brian's an offensive coordinator, played the offensive line position, and here we are still having these same issues with the offensive line. But when it comes to the offensive scheme that Iowa runs, you have an offensive lineman who has no experience as an offensive coordinator calling plays, and we're still kind of wondering why we are where we are. It's not a shock to me. And until we change that, and I agree with you, I'm a Kirk Ferentz supporter to the end. But until we change our offensive coordinator and maybe even, I don't want to say change our scheme, but tweak our scheme, we're going to keep having these same issues.
I couldn't agree more. And here's the deal. I'm no offensive guru either, but there is the other side of it where people say, well, the offense wasn't good under Greg Davis. It wasn't good under Ken O'Keefe. But I will say this, there were years where it was good enough, right?
Right.
you could say it was good enough last year, but boy, the schedule was such a dud. It just, in hindsight, it was such a dud. I would never use the word luck to describe a sporting event or really anything, because I just don't believe in luck per se. But I think the bottom line is, you can argue that, no offensive coordinator has been good here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Kirk is controlling the offense, because it could just be a matter of, we've only had 3 offensive coordinators here, and Kirk's just done a poor job hiring those offensive coordinators. He picked an old buddy of his in Ken O'Keefe. He picked his son in Brian Ferentz, and the other guy, Greg Davis, is really the only anomaly, you could say. But they did go 12-0 in 2015. Now it was a weaker schedule too, and I know the offense wasn't great that year, but at least Iowa had good quarterback play in 2015. They had a great quarterback playing in 2015. The numbers may not reflect it, but I think any Iowa fan who followed that season would admit that they would absolutely do cartwheels while, I don't even know, while sucking on a jawbreaker.
No, I hear you.
To have CJ Beathard back in 2021 or 2022. And so I think you can attribute to a couple different things. Primarily, they've not done a good job identifying candidates for that position. And it's the most important position. Certainly, it's the most important position on offense. I think that's obvious that the offensive coordinator would be the most important position. And now you've probably given Brian Ferentz reigns to the second most important position on offense, and that's coaching the quarterbacks.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors there, I think, when it comes to our offensive coordinator selection. And what's the best way to phrase it? I think Kirk has a little bit too much power when it comes to the Iowa football program. And even if people wanted to speak out to him and say, hey, we need a change, something has to be done on the offensive side of the ball, there's just too much power allocated to him right now with how long he's been there, that maybe people who know that there needs to be a change just aren't wanting to speak up, or they know it's just going to fall on deaf ears. And you said it earlier, I've been watching for the past 20 minutes. People say, well, this is just Iowa's brand of football. No, this is Kirk's brand of football. Solid defense, great special teams, and boring offense. Don't turn it over. Have quarterbacks in there that can manage the game, not cause turnovers. And that's just his brand of football. Now, has college football passed Kirk by? No. Has it offensively? Absolutely. And he keeps putting people in positions on the offensive side of the ball that just aren't getting the job done. And he's just okay with that, because that's his brand of football. Then it trickles into recruiting, not to keep on the call too long, but when you look at the offensive skill players we've had in the state of Iowa over the past 10 years, most of them are going elsewhere. They don't want to come to Iowa because we don't have an offense that's going to really show their skill set. And you alluded to the transfer portal earlier when it comes to quarterback play. We need to get into the transfer portal and try to pull guys to the offensive side of the ball, but we don't have an offense that it's going to get them exposure to the next level or get them reps that are going to get them looked at for the next level. It's not our offense. So nobody wants to come here because we're a run first offense where we don't pass it. I look at Tyrone Tracy and Charlie Jones transferring out. I'm sure your previous caller saw the same thing. Tyrone Tracy didn't have much of a game against Penn State, but no. Charlie Jones lit it up for over 110, maybe 120 yards with 8 or 10.
Didn't he have 150 yards?
Probably. I stopped watching that once he got to 100 yards, because I'm just thinking to myself, here's a guy that we lost that left our offense. And granted, the quarterback, I guess, is a childhood friend of his, but more so, if he stayed at Iowa, he might get 3 or 4 catches a game for 47 yards, but then have a few punt returns. And who wants to play there if you're trying to go beyond college football?
Yeah, anybody who blames Charlie Jones is too much of a homer to help themselves.
Right.
And that's fine. They have every right to have their opinions and whatnot, but it's just funny, the people on Twitter that I even see some of the media, and I'm not going to name names, but some of the Iowa media, not most, but some of the Iowa media that latch on to a narrative that is fan created and that gets under fans' skin just like that, or just agrees with those notions that are completely ridiculous. Like, he did Iowa wrong by leaving when he did. And, that's a discussion for a different day. But I'm in agreement with you. There's no reason to blame Charlie Jones for wanting to leave. He did what's best for him, and clearly you can say, I love, now that's the other thing that we've heard since that Charlie Jones game on Thursday. I've heard so many Iowa fans, well, he took the L. He took the L. How's that L feel? Who cares? The guy's trying to go to the league.
Yep.
You listen, if anybody wants to sit here and talk about one side of the ball not meaning something, then it should be Iowa fans, because they have an elite defense and they fall back on that defense year after year because the offense is inept. Well, Purdue fans can do the opposite. And yes, they don't win at a rate that Iowa wins. Jeff Brom's not won nearly as many games. He's not been employed there nearly as long as Kirk Ferentz. But my point is, these kids, their goal is to play football and make money. And Charlie Jones is not only more marketable to the league, he's more marketable from an NIL standpoint, being a guy who can actually produce numbers like he produced Thursday night against Penn State. So, no, absolutely don't blame him. And this was just evidence, unfortunately. Even I, and you listen to my show, you watch the show, Vincent, you know that I've said since December that I didn't have any real reason to believe the offense was going to take a big step forward. I didn't. I've never, ever claimed that I thought it was going to, but I also tried to at least wait and see, right? Let's just wait and see. And that's all you can do. And that's why there were so many boos today in that stadium, because fans, a lot of fans, not all of them, but a lot of fans were in that same mindset of, God, I just don't have any confidence, but let's just wait and see. Maybe they'll shock me. And then when it's worse than it was when you saw it last,
Right.
it's like, oh, crap, man. Crap.
Yep.
And I'll say something else here, and I don't mean to take over here, but
you're good.
I'll just say this, Vincent. You probably heard me a couple weeks ago, and I was told on good authority that Iowa's open scrimmage, they're not their open, their private scrimmage they had 2 weeks ago, that the offense gained exactly 2 first downs against the second and third team defense all day, and they played 2 whole quarters, and people were like, well, that's just a bad day, I hope.
Nope.
And that's exactly what we just saw today. That's a repeat of what they had in the closed scrimmage 2 weeks ago. So I don't know. I don't know what to say, but you're right. It's not a shock that elite players on offense don't want to play here. And Iowa's very fortunate that they have Sam Laporta and everybody on defense, because those guys, Phil Parker should be making double what he's making. He's earned that.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know what Kirk's deal is. I wish I was a reporter. I know you have access to media interviews with some of these coaches and stuff. I wish somebody would just walk up to Kirk or not walk up, but ask him at a press conference, when are you going to get an offense? And don't give us your, hey, we're working on it. We're working every day. When are you going to come up with an offense? It's so blatantly obvious because you have such a stellar D, special teams, but it's like you say, hey, you offensive guys, why don't you guys just go run some laps or something and we'll just check on you guys. When are you going to come up with an offense? Give us an answer. Like, give us a legitimate, understandable answer on what's going on with your offense and what your philosophy is, so that we can at least just to have an answer, I guess, just to have an answer. But not to beat a dead horse with this, your offense is not going to change with Brian, an offensive lineman, calling plays or running your offense. It's not going to change under Kirk Ferentz, because this is Kirk ball. It's not Iowa Hawkeye football. It's Kirk ball. You're just not going to see it change. And until this is just my own opinion, until Kirk decides to go ahead and hang it up and move on, you won't see it change. It's going to be the same brand of football. And then every 3 or 4 years, you'll have an offense that looks to us amazing, but to everybody else just mediocre. And we'll have, like we had in 2020 or 2019, with Stanley and Brandon Smith and Amir Smith, Marset. You'll have those odd or random years where it's just better. But other than that, this is what you're going to get, and it's not going to change because Kirk has far too much control within the Iowa football program, even above Gary Barta. And I know he's the AD, but if you ask anybody who has common sense, who runs that football program, or who has more power, is it the AD and Gary Barta, or is it the head coach and Kirk Ferentz? It's Kirk Ferentz all day, every day. So this is what you're going to see. So Iowa fans, just get prepared. This is the same brand of football you're going to have. I'm even more shocked at how poorly the offensive line played, given that we have a head coach who's known for producing linemen. And our offensive coordinator is also a former offensive lineman. So that was what I was more concerned with today. And real quick to end, much credit to the Jackrabbits. Like you said, they're extremely good. Is it FBS team? Am I saying that right?
FCS.
FCS.
Yep.
They're an extremely good FCS team. They don't get enough credit. and they came to play today. That's about as hard hitting as I've seen in a season opener that I can remember. And then again, much kudos to Torrey Taylor. If there's anybody who is an MVP today, that guy is increasing his draft stock game by game. And I appreciate your time, Corey.
Thanks, Vincent. Appreciate the call this evening. Thanks for supporting. Yep. All right, folks, we've got Coach Don Patterson in the queue waiting to join here, and I want to get to our next caller, but we're going to wait just a moment because Coach Patterson is with us. And Coach, I'll admit this before we get into it, and we do have a caller on hold, but let me just say this. If you hadn't known better, if you didn't know the score of this game, and you just watched this post-game show so far, and I've been on for about an hour, you would have thought we'd have lost. I don't remember the last time that I've heard so many frustrated fans. We've talked about the defense, but let's start out with the defense. I tried to lead with that. Iowa, I thought, showed out against what I thought was the better of the two units for South Dakota State. I thought the cornerbacks played well. I thought Riley was disciplined. I don't think they got tested as much as I probably would have tested them had I been John Stibelmeyer and that coaching staff. But I thought Quinn Schulte played well. I know you agree with that. And just overall, the front seven was really good as expected.
Yeah, I think we had said, Corey, going that based on what we knew about them, that South Dakota State's strength was with their offense. That was the better unit. That's at least what people thought based on last year. But I give their defense a lot of credit. They did a good job putting pressure on our quarterback. And you could argue that we didn't pass protect very well, but South Dakota State had something to do with that. They had, as you mentioned the other day, they had good senior depth in their D-line. A lot of experienced players that made a lot of sure tackles. So there was a defensive struggle on both sides. Both teams played. I was trying to think of the last time I'd seen a game that didn't involve at least one touchdown. Pretty amazing to play all day, and you got 2 field goals and 2 safeties to show for it. And thankfully, 7 of those 10 points belong to us.
Don, before we go on, I got to get to this next caller because he's been waiting. Our next caller has been waiting on hold for a long time, and then we'll get back to the breakdown from Coach Patterson. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. It's Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Hello, Corey and Coach. This is Brad.
Hey, Brad.
So I just want to run something by Coach here. You know, back in the day, Kirk had everybody read a book called Good to Great. And the premise of it is the biggest enemy of great is good. And in Iowa right now, we have a great defense, great special teams. But Kirk is like choking on the fact that to ever get great, he's got to change the whole offensive philosophy because it's horrible. And it doesn't have anything to do with Doyle, because if Doyle was the reason our offensive line was so bad, then the defensive line would be terrible, but they're not. We're just poorly coached on offense. And we have been for like about 4 years. So anyway, coaches, tell me what you think, because I know you got a great offensive mind. I just think Kirk's just too damn stubborn. I don't know what you're going to do not to pull that kid. That kid today couldn't hit a wide open receiver if his life depended on it. And I like Spencer. He's a good kid. But some guys can't play in games. Some guys are good at practice, and some guys are horrible in the game time situations. I know that as an old coach. I used to have players who were great in practice, stunk in games. Some kids who stunk in games were great in practice. Anyway, I rambled enough, Coach. Just want to hear what you have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, caller.
Well, Corey's heard me say before that quarterbacks get too much credit when you win and too much blame when you lose. And I guess I could expand that to say if the offense struggles, the quarterback in many cases gets too much blame. Right now it's easy to beat up on Spencer, and certainly Spencer's got to play a lot better than what he did today. But I have to admit, from where I was sitting, it looked to me like there were people in our backfield in a hurry.
Sure.
Looked like we didn't have a lot of time to throw.
Sure.
And we already know that Spencer's not very mobile, doesn't have as much as capabilities we'd like for him to have. So it isn't any surprise we ran out of time a few times to get the ball out. The one interception, I think the replay probably showed this. He had a guy that was kind of draped around his one of his legs, kind of spun him a little bit, and I think that's what led to an inaccurate throw on the interception. I have no excuse for him with too many high passes. He's got to remember that you got to transfer your weight to your front foot. That ball's going high because he's simply not doing that with any consistency. And there were times when for sure he had time to do it. So he's still inaccurate with his throwing. Doesn't really have a grooved throwing motion as I wished he did. You've heard me say before, Corey, one of the best things Spencer does is throw the ball downfield, and yet we didn't really make any attempts downfield.
Why?
Well, one reason I'm sure they would argue is we couldn't buy ourselves enough time with our pass protection. And my counter to that is that's fine. I'll go with your very best play action pass. Maybe even keep a tight end in, which at least can solidify that edge of the formation. And it can be a two-man route. It can be just a high-low, post versus dig. And of course, if the play action's good, maybe you win with the post. As you recall, Corey, they had a post route that was open, and thankfully they overthrew it. But to my knowledge, that's the only ball that was really thrown up and over by either team. I'm sure that South Dakota State, looking back, would tell you that they wish they'd taken another few shots downfield because one score, of course, would have been the difference in the game.
That was my observation, Don, and I said that was my key heading into this game. I said, what will happen when they decide to attack Iowa's corners, who were down a guy in Jamari Harris and had a guy in Quinn Schulte that hadn't really had any starting experience under his belt. And that would be the one thing that I'm sure John Stiegelmeier will probably look back at and say, we should have taken a couple shots. They almost hit one on Yankee, one of the Yankee kids early in the game, overthrew him. That'd have been a touchdown.
Right.
That'd have been a touchdown. They would have won the game, most likely. I agree with you. Let's get to our next caller who's been on hold. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Soya.
Who is it?
Soya.
Soya. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Am I on now or wait?
Yes, you're on the air with Coach Patterson.
All right, Coach Patterson. I'm gonna say two quick things. One is when I look back on the Iowa offense and Kirk Ferentz, he's a trench type of coach, meaning he understands that the game pretty much is going to be won and lost in the trenches, offense and defensive line. And we've had, we can honestly say on average, we've always had pretty good offensive line. But when I look at the quarterback position at Iowa, one, I just don't see the development of our quarterbacks. Again, remember Stanley. I think Stanley, he started 3 years. And his senior year, I thought his senior year was pretty mediocre. I think our best year as quarterbacks is when we had quarterbacks that was decently to pretty mobile. When you look at Brad Banks, Drew Tate, and was it Beathard, I think? These three quarterbacks, they was, I wouldn't say the most mobilest coach, but they were on average pretty mobile. And I think we need to get back to either developing better quarterbacks or looking to get a little bit more mobile quarterbacks. And I'll end with this. I think with Kirk Ferentz, his style of offense is 1990s. And the whole college football landscape, even the NFL, has moved past that sort of sit back and watch quarterback. They're looking at a little bit of mobility. So do you think question the coach, do you think we should look to get a quarterback that has a little bit more mobility? And if you get that with a good offensive line play, no telling where we may go. Thank you for my call.
Thank you, sir. It's a lot of good stuff from our callers today, Don.
Yeah, the answer to that question is yes. We always used to look back in the Coach Fridays. We always looked for what we refer to as a combination quarterback. He needed to be at least a capable runner. He didn't have to be a great runner, but he had to have some escapability. If you think back to quarterbacks we've had that had Chuck Long was not a great runner, but he did run for some positive yards in his career. A better example would be Matt Rogers, who was a two-time All-Big Ten quarterback himself, a good runner. Brad Banks, a good runner. C.J. Beathard, a good runner. I was watching Illinois play last night. That quarterback they have, he saved them any number of times by running for first downs.
And hold on a second, real quick, Don, not to and I'm speaking for myself. He's a kid I said at the time Iowa needed to pursue. They recruited Connor Bazelak out of high school. He had won, I think he was, freshman of the year in the SEC or something a couple of years ago for Missouri. That was another guy we chose to pass on in the transfer portal.
Yeah, no, Bazelak does not run like DeVito.
DeVito, sure. But Bazelak had a great game last night.
Well, you're wondering how Indiana's going to beat them because it looked like Illinois was the better team, and yet it didn't work out. I was concerned about Illinois having a short week, and I think that might have had a little bit to do with it. But hats off to Indiana for finding a way to win. The one thing I'm sure of, the parameters favored Illinois last night, and yet Indiana won. So good for them. That's that a year ago they found ways to lose games. This year, at least one time, they found a way to win a game. And let's hope we can do the same. It's a concern. Offense didn't do much to get us excited today. LaShawn Williams ran 24 times for 72 yards. He caught 2 passes for 23. So his all-purpose yardage was 95 based on 26 touches. That's a lot of touches. If I had to name an offensive player for the game, I'd have to go with Arlen Bruce. 5 catches for 68 yards. He ran the ball once for 11. That, as I recall, was a fly sweep that worked well. The specialty team player of the game, of course, had to be Torrey. 10 punts for 479. And Torrey would be quick to say, be sure and give some credit to my snapper, because if you notice, that ball is right there every time. He didn't have to jump around to field snaps. We have a good snapper. We have good coverage, some excellent coverage today. And let's face it, one big difference in the game was field position. And it was
the whole game
generated primarily in 2 ways. One was by trading punts. That was in our favor by a long shot. And then beyond that, you got to give a little bit of credit to our kickoff coverage. And I thought Drew Stevens did a good job with kickoffs. Thankfully, we made 1 out of 2 field goals. That could have, as you've heard me say before, Corey, 1 missed field goal can cost you a game, and it could have happened that way today. Thankfully, it didn't. But, the bottom line is, and on defense, if I had to pick one player, I'd pick Schulte. And you've heard me say, at least in private, Corey, maybe I haven't said it publicly, but I had some concerns going into today about how well Schulte could play. I wasn't sure he could play at the same level as Jack Kerner. To be honest with you, I think he did. He made any number of key plays today. He played with good anticipation and good aggression. He was a sure tackler. He reminded me a lot of the very best of Jack Kerner. So that's a good sign. I can't imagine that Phil Parker's not going to be happy when he's done looking at Schulte's game. I don't know if I would imagine he'd feel pretty good about any number of defensive backs, and for that matter, any number of defensive players. It's not a surprise, of course, when Jack Campbell makes a lot of plays. I think it was kind of appropriate that Jack Campbell got that first safety. That made sense. And I was so happy for Joe Evans that he got the second one, because as you know, Joe's dad played for me. And
by the way, to our caller that compared it to Kirk's offense to the 90s offense, you remember you're talking to a coach that was the coordinator at Iowa in the 90s. So let's not.
Yeah, and I would invite him to go back and look at our numbers, because they were a lot better than what we've seen in recent years.
They were. Yes, they were. Let's. I know we've got a lot going here. We got a caller on wait. We've got people trying to call in. I just want to let everybody know you can call. If you're calling right now, we do have a caller on the line, so you're not going to be able to get through. But you can join the show by video. I've talked about that, so I'll put this up here. But we do have a caller on hold, so don't call the number right now. But you can also find the link to join our discussion by video in the description below of this live stream. We're live streaming on both our From the Hawkeye of the Storm channel here on YouTube and Iowa Football at the Voice of College Football. So again, video link in the description below. That's the phone number, but wait, because we do have a caller waiting. And before we get to our caller, I want to get to a couple super chats that we've put off. And first of all, thank you to Dave. I believe this is Minnesota Dave. Dave Valensky says, of course I call and it rings all the way through and you don't pick up. You don't recognize my number, do you? Serious, though. If this is your offense, Iowa fans better pray that any team doesn't score a touchdown against them the whole season. Dave, I wasn't ignoring your call. It's going to ring through. You're not going to get a busy tone, but when there's somebody else on the line, it's going to ring through and you're going to get the automated response. So that's why I didn't answer. I wasn't ignoring your call. You can certainly try to call in or you can join us by video chat. But appreciate the super chat, Dave. And appreciate you being here and supporting the show despite being, I think you're a Minnesota fan. So thank you. All right, let's get to our next caller who's been on hold. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Lomansky, Corey, good afternoon.
Hey there, Lomansky. How you doing?
Minnesota Dave can blame me because I'm in his way, so he should blame me. I graduated from Iowa, so I'll take his venom.
There you go. Appreciate it.
Don, I want to thank you for being on this show and all your insight and your steady Eddie, which we probably all need today. The author of Necessity is the mother of invention, has an unknown author, but it was first used in Aesop's Fables.
Good to know. I wasn't sure where I first heard it.
That question.
That's good to know. Does that mean I can take credit for saying it first? I guess not, huh? I believe the fables were introduced long before I was.
I guess I understand the not to lose strategy. When your offense is not as good as your defense and special teams. So we got 2 out of 3 great units. And I just would like maybe you and Corey to put your head coaching, because I opened with that Aesop's Fables comment because if you noticed the Jackrabbits, and by the way, I'm going to be in Brookings, South Dakota to watch the Jackrabbits against UC Davis. My relative plays offensive line for UC Davis, which will be fun to watch the Jackrabbits again. If you watch the Jackrabbits, they try to have running plays for their quarterback. And Don, you and I have talked about packages before. I guess I understand playing our QB quite a lot of the game, but if you need something, it's a hot day. I don't understand why we only have one running back that we can use. I don't understand last year, Tyler Goodson's average was it wasn't even 4 yards per carry, if my memory's right, and the better Big Ten teams were at 6 yards per carry. I don't understand, is our recruiting that bad that there's no other running back to spell LaShawn? And I don't understand why we don't have a package when obviously our offensive line needs more time to solidify. We don't throw the ball down the field. You and Corey put your head coaching hats on and give me some feedback.
I don't have a head coaching hat, so Don, take it.
Well, you've heard me say before that, Corey, you've asked me, what can we do to improve our offense? And one of the things I've mentioned to you, there is a sound argument for developing a more expansive offense. In other words, simply having more plays within your offense to draw from. One of the reasons I think that people defend us well is we maybe don't have as many plays that we select from as some teams do. That may sound crazy, but I know for a fact that's the way we used to do it. And I got feedback from rival coaches that after the fact that indicated that's one reason we were hard to defend is we had so many plays they couldn't practice them all. And you can pick and choose, of course, from week to week. You might, as you've heard me say, Corey, you might run a play in game 1. You might not run it until game 6. You may not run it in 2, 3, 4, and 5, but if game 6 it applies, you pull it out, you shine it up, and you put it on the field, and they haven't even worked on it. For all we know, they didn't even really look at game 1 in preparing for game 6. So those are the kind of things I think that made us difficult to defend, is you simply didn't have a good idea of what was coming next. I think that would help us if we expanded our offense with a greater variety of plays. And of course, you can't just be running plays to be running plays. Ideally, all the new plays we would add to the offense would be the result of a lot of film study and a lot of time spent asking the question, what if? You know, what if we do this? What if we tried this? What if we have this different personnel grouping, the same concept with a different player in that spot? Things like that. So the bottom line, I would challenge our guys to be more imaginative, to ask that question, what if? It's time consuming, requires a lot of work, but hopefully you're able to say and look your players in the eye when you say it, you know, guarantee you that our coaching staff has outworked theirs. And we're going to do everything we can to help you guys to win this next game. So the one thing I know for a fact, our players always went into every game with the confidence that our coaches were going to do a better job of preparing them for the game than the opposing coaches.
And Lemansky, all I would add to that, and Don, I know you wouldn't probably go out and say this, but I'm going to say it. If those changes and those play calling changes and schemes were going to be expanded upon, changed, adjusted, that would have happened sometime in the last 8 months. Am I wrong, Don?
Well, it's too bad it hadn't happened yet, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen in the weeks ahead. So it's not too late. It's not too late to make those adjustments. Obviously, it doesn't help us with some of those games we had last fall. It didn't help us today. You know, 168 yards total offense is pretty amazing when you realize your defense only gave up 120.
Right.
Think about that. You know, we were doing a good job defensively with getting off the field. The only problem is their offense couldn't stay on the field. So both offenses had the same problem. The defenses won the day on both teams.
Interesting comment here from Mac Miney. Anything else, Lemansky?
Oh, yes. I really appreciate the comments on Quinn Schulte. He rose the occasion. He surprised me. Didn't expect it. And I think the situation with our team, considering you're going to compete with the Michigans and the Ohio States of the world, I think you've got to put people on the field like another running back on a hot day, or have a package for some other quarterback. At the end of this game, and Don will maybe enjoy this comment, at the end of this game, I can see Don Patterson sending in a mobile quarterback on the bench today and go in the huddle, and he tells the whole team this is the play, but Don Patterson says, you tell the whole team this, then you run your tail off to the right, and the whole field should shift one way, and you go the other, and we'll run the clock out and win this game. I can see Don Patterson do that now in the call, and thanks for all your efforts, Corey and Don.
Thanks, Lemansky. Appreciate it. Good stuff. Our callers have brought it today, Don. The callers have brought it much more than the Iowa offense brought it. And I do know we have a couple calls here waiting. Again, I know I keep saying this, but if you're going to call our phone number, it's 515-635-1601. We just have the one line open, but we have unlimited lines by video. So if you want to join, you don't have to have your video on, but if you want to join by StreamYard, click on the link in the description below. Our call line is busy right now, so don't call our phone line. I'm going to put you on hold, caller, but definitely call by means of the StreamYard link, and we're going to welcome Hawkeye Howard to the show, and he has been a loyal listener since the inception of this show. Hawkeye Howard, how you doing? How's the thriving metropolis of Springfield, Missouri?
Doing all right. How are you?
Doing just fine. What do you think about that defense?
Defense is doing great. I mean, the offense is where I'm worried about, and you know that.
You're not the only one, sir.
It looked like Spencer is like the same old Spencer from last year. Am I wrong?
Don, did you see? I'm not trying to be sarcastic or anything, and I'm gonna. I got to get up from my seat here and make an adjustment with my setup. But I'm going to ask you a question, then I'll get up and let you and Hawkeye Howard go back and forth for a moment. Did you feel like there was anything that you saw from Spencer that you felt had made a jump?
I don't have the advantage, of course, of studying the tape. Just watching it in real time, I couldn't honestly say that I saw areas of definite improvement. I do recall there was one instance for sure where he stared down his receiver, really telegraphed his throw too long, and when the ball got to the receiver, it was on target, but in the meantime, he stared him down to the point that a defender was able to close on the receiver and get there a split second after the ball, and of course it was broken up. I do remember another time on a naked, you know what I mean by a naked, you fake one way and roll the other. And he had a receiver that was open short, but he looked downfield, and I think he threw high downfield as I recall. But the short receiver was wide open. It would have been a definite gain. It wouldn't have been for the same big yardage. But as that was an early down, it would have been okay if we just hit the short receiver and gained 6 or 8 or 10. And who knows, maybe they break a tackle and we gain 15. But the deeper throw was the one he went with, and he threw it high. Again, but I'm a little frustrated for Spencer because I know it doesn't help him to hear the crowd reaction. I know fans are frustrated. Fans certainly have a right. We've talked about this, Corey. It costs a lot of money to be an Iowa football fan. By the time you travel from home and pay for 2 nights lodging and pay for the tickets and the parking and whatnot, it's not a cheap endeavor. So I understand they have a right to voice their displeasure, but I don't think it helps those young men on the field to hear that. And but if I was giving Spencer advice, I would say if you don't enjoy the negative crowd reaction, then make positive plays. Yeah. Bottom line, they're going to respond to how you play. If you don't play well, they're not going to be happy and they're going to voice their displeasure. And so they have a right to do that. And it was a frustrating day. -2 on turnovers. We overcame that. Here was another difference in the game that I didn't touch on. When I was talking about field position, Corey, we talked about trading punts and that being to our advantage. But here's another hidden stat. They had 12 penalties for 67 yards. Most of them were false starts, of course. We only had 2 for 15. So even a 5-yard penalty can kill a drive, of course, especially if there's not much offense. If the defense isn't playing well, even a 5-yard penalty is absolutely trashes any particular possession. And that happened to them a lot today. Those 5-yard penalties, every time we backed them up 5 yards, of course, that was 5 more yards of field position as we traded punts. It wasn't just that we were picking up yardage on trading punts. It was also the hidden yardage in that first half, of course. They actually had more yards than we did. I was going to jokingly say, but I don't think anybody's in a mood for a joke. Here's the good news. We had twice as much total offense in the second half as we did the first half. The bad news is we only had 56 in the first half. That left us with 112 in the second half. So that's not nearly enough to win a football game against a quality Big Ten team. We know that. So we have work to do. Those linemen, I don't doubt, are going to get better. Let's give South Dakota State credit for being a lot better than what some people might think. They are one of the very best teams in FCS football, and it did not surprise me. Yesterday at the Garden Club, I mentioned to them, I said I would never gamble on a football game ever, but if you put a gun to my head, knowing that it was supposed to be, I was a 15.5-point favorite, I said that's a really easy decision. I would take South Dakota State in the points because I don't think it's going to be that big a spread. And I wasn't being critical of Iowa when I said it. I was just giving a lot of credit to South Dakota State.
Well, I would have to ask you one thing. When those penalties they had, I think it was a large part of the fan noise.
Very true. Most of them were in the north end of the field. I think it's a little bit louder on that north end. There's a lot of seats behind that end zone, and those people make a lot of noise, and that sound, I think, is kind of trapped. It can't leave very well. It just goes out to the field.
I'm looking forward to hearing that because I'll be there in the Michigan-Iowa game in the north end zone, and I will be screaming my head off. But I think that's where we kind of undiscovered a extra player there as the fans.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. If Michigan has one possession to win the game, I hope they're driving to the north end zone because that's going to be a little bit more of a problem, I think, than the south end zone.
Well, I hope they get some things just fixed or some things figured out between the game come up with Iowa State. Otherwise, people are going to be eating our cookies, and we're not going to be happy. So that's all I got to say.
Thanks, Hawkeye. I always appreciate your calls. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of great calls, and I know we got a caller on hold. We got people trying to get in. I want to address this comment from T. Hawkeye. So, Corey, how does your 10-2 prediction? I don't know what the question is there, T. Hawkeye, but I never predicted that Iowa would go 10-2. In fact, I think I said the opposite, Don. I said unless the offense is substantially better, there's zero chance Iowa goes 10-2. I believe I said the opposite of that. Now, I did predict that they would go 9-3, in large part due to what I think is one of the best front sevens in the country. Certainly didn't do anything to change my mind on that front today. I did say one thing that they may have proved me wrong in, as I had said over and over again, I can't see the offense being worse because it's hard to be worse than they were last year. And that's not trying to be disrespectful or snarky, Don. But when you're 123 out of 130 teams in total offense, it's actually mathematically almost impossible to be worse. Today, Iowa looked worse. Let's get to our next caller, who's been patiently waiting on hold. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. It's Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
James.
Hey, James.
Just watching, by the way, I was watching Nebraska, North Dakota. It looks like North Dakota just scored to tie it at half.
Is that North Dakota and Nebraska are tied at halftime?
Yeah, well, I think he's in. It looks like he got in. North Dakota did. But
okay.
I was letting you know. I didn't know if you knew or not. Or wanted
no, I appreciate that.
The way Petras looked, I'm not trying to blame Petras because obviously offensive line was bad too. But when I watched the game, you look at Gronowski, he was taking hits, right, and he still was delivering football. Petras was taking hits and the balls weren't being delivered. You know what I'm saying? I get he still needs to deliver the ball on after getting hit. It doesn't need to as much. You're getting hit, I get that. But one quarterback's doing it and the other quarterback isn't, and the other quarterback's bigger. And not even sometimes he wasn't pressuring, he just overthrew people. I don't understand how they just didn't give it a chance. Yes, it might not have been better, but it definitely could have been worse. Maybe he would have sparked something that game that might have turned something around. We won, so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean,
I'll just say that.
I'm saying, we won. So
yeah, let me just say this, James, to Coach
something.
Patterson real quick in response to that comment about a quarterback switch. Don, I never in this game thought for a second that they were going to make a quarterback change. I just never thought they were going to, and I mean, I guess we can discuss why I didn't think they were going to, if anybody cares. But Don, did you ever think that there was a moment where Kirk was going to pull the plug? I don't.
No, I didn't think so. And I think one reason I felt that way, you heard me say before the game, one of the keys to the game, we need to be able to establish a running game so we can be effective with play action passes. Obviously, we didn't establish the running game. We ran 35 times for 59 yards. And there was some sack yardage in there, I guess, that hurt our run total. But you've already heard me say LaShawn Williams ran 24 times for 72 yards. So 3 yards per carry, and that's not affected by sack numbers. Those are his actual rushing attempts. If we're getting 3 yards a pop with our number one running back, that's not good. We need more. We need up to be over 4, certainly.
But can
Anything
I be
else,
honest,
James?
though?
What's that?
It's easier to sell out run when you have Petras at quarterback, so you can stop him to 3 yards of rush. You can sell out run and make Petras beat you, and it's tough for Petras to beat you. Not saying they should change quarterbacks. I agree why they didn't, but I'm saying it might have been better to maybe bring a spark if you bring Padilla in. But I'm saying I think teams are just going to sell out run and make Petras beat him, and I don't know if he can beat a lot of teams.
Yeah, I mean, how much of that is true, Don, that teams are able to sell out against the run because they don't believe Spencer can beat him?
Well, I think one place that makes a difference if you're looking at spread formations. Now today we did run a lot of 12 personnel as I thought we would. You saw a lot of Lachey in there as a tight end, and so we played most of the day with 2 wide receivers. Some of it was pro formation, 21 personnel, but quite a bit of it was 12 personnel too. Regardless of the personnel grouping, one of the things you need to be able to do, I say it this way, if you get into a spread formation and they deploy to defend that spread formation, that means you've got a light box. You know what I mean by a light box, Corey? Players that are lined up between the tackles and no deeper than linebacker depth. And you feel comfortable running a light box as long as that remaining back, the quarterback, is not a threat to run the ball. A simple example, if you've got 5 offensive linemen to block and you've got a back in the backfield, that makes 6 players in the box, and of course the quarterback in the box too. How many defenders do you need in the box? Well, you certainly don't need more than 6, because at best they've got 6 blockers, and the only way they have 6 blockers is if they involve the running back in blocking for the quarterback. So you may feel comfortable going with a 5-man box because you're not worried about the quarterback being a runner. So that's where it really shows up more. If the quarterback's not a threat to run, then you're more than comfortable to deploy people to the outside of the formations, defend the pass, and dare them to run the ball.
Yeah. Defense obviously played well. I told my friends a lot of times, I was like, plus to win this game, the defense obviously is going to be the key. And like Tory Taylor was special, but like if it wasn't for Tory Taylor, we definitely, I don't even think we would have won the game. And the fact that him pinning people where he put them was just helped us so much on defense, because the crowd, on top of that being loud and drawing all the false starts, and then just the way the defense was getting after, I felt like was the reason we won. But I don't think it's going to be the reason we can beat other teams like Iowa State. Like, I think we need a little bit of offense just to win. Like, just a little bit. A couple of touchdowns here and there. Because, like, Will McDonald, what offensive line was, I think Will McDonald, I think that's his name. Is it Will McDonald or Will? Yep. It's Will McDonald, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think he'll have a field day if the offensive line keeps looking the same way it did.
Good point. Yeah, they've got a pretty good rusher coming in, one of the best in the country next week, down in Will McDonald. And you're right, caller, James. The field position, I think, was the story of the game. I mean, you don't get 2 safeties without winning the field position battle. And the 2 safeties are what won the game. So Tory Taylor, I mean, as much as I hate the slogan, punting is winning, unfortunately, it's true right now for Iowa.
Yep, but I appreciate y'all for taking my call. Glad to have you back, Don. And hopefully next week will be a little better. Hopefully we can win. At least that's the most important thing, is getting the win, no matter how ugly it is. If you're going to see 1-0, you're not going to see, 2 safeties as much. Like when you look at week 3, week 4, you're going to see a win, not 2 safeties to win the game. So it's a win is a win, but hopefully we can look better in the future, and we'll see what happens. But I'm optimistic, but sometimes it's hard to be optimistic with this team when it looks the same every single week, if you get what I'm saying.
I get you, James. I appreciate the call, sir.
Yep. Bye.
Corey, here's something I would wonder. They had 26 pass attempts. They ran the ball 31 times. That's 57 snaps. Obviously, we did a good job of getting on and off the field with our defense. Here's my question to you. 57 total snaps. How many of them were they backed up inside the 10? It seemed like there must have been 15 of them inside the 10.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of the game trying to get off the goal line. And you got to give credit to the kicking game, because that's what provided us with that winning margin.
Appreciate all the interaction today. We've got another caller here. We're going to put you on hold, caller, and we'll get to you in a moment. But BIB gives us the super sticker. Thank you, BIB. And I want to thank Richard Nicholson. Thank you for this kind words from Richard. Appreciate you being here, everyone for being here. Springtime 0502, thank you for the super chat. Who was the QB coach that Iowa passed on from North Dakota State? I talked about that on the show in the spring, so Springtime, ironically enough, remembers stuff from his own season. Get the pun there. That would have been Randy Hedberg, and Randy Hedberg, pretty certain was interested. I can tell you for a certain that he was interested in the job, and we're talking about quarterback coach. he was turned down by Iowa. So that is hopefully that answers your question. Springtime. Let's get to our next. Actually, before we do that, I want to get to this other super chat from the real Hayden. And remember, I read your super chat whether you're, unless it's vulgar, I'm not going to read that. But if it's okay within the bounds of that, we're going to read it here because we appreciate the donations. Just give Brian's salary to Phil Parker, and I'll coach the offense for free. I promise it won't look any worse than today. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Enough said from the real Hayden. And finally, I didn't want to skip over Kel's bells. Thank you, real Hayden, for the super chat. Kelly says, does the AD have any clout to step in and strongly suggest coach or lineup changes? That's an interesting conversation we've talked about. Certainly the AD should have a large say in, making decisions in the offseason with coaches. But if you're Barry Alvarez, I think Barry Alvarez absolutely has a say during the season.
I was going to say, only if the AD has a background in coaching himself.
Sure. Osborne would be another example.
And maybe he has a statue of him somewhere near the stadium.
Right, but I don't think Gary Barta has any leverage as it relates to in-season stuff, unless there's something egregious where a change needs to be made from an administration level. Would that be how you'd answer that question, Don?
Yes, nothing to do with strategy. He wouldn't be involved there, I'm sure.
But good question. Thank you, Kelly, for that question. Want to get to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Minnesota Dave.
Hey, Minnesota Dave. I saw you ripping me in the chat. I promise I was not skipping over your super chat. It just, when you've got about 200 comments between two channels, it took a while to get to it. I appreciate it.
Hey, can you hold on for 1 second? I have your show on the phone, and I have to pause it.
Sure.
So I can hear you and not hear what you said beforehand. You know what I'm saying?
While Dave's saying that, I want to acknowledge LH says the guy talking looks like Burt Reynolds. You're the guy talking, Coach.
Yeah, I'm back.
We've never heard that before, right, Don?
Well,
stunt double for Burt Reynolds.
Burt's no longer with us, so I don't know if looking like Burt Reynolds is a good thing or not. Maybe Burt Reynolds in his last few days, maybe, I'm afraid.
All right, Minnesota Dave.
I just wanted to say that your offense is the worst I've ever seen since the 90s Vanderbilt teams. I mean, this is just bad. I hope you guys figure out something.
I can't disagree based on one game. I can't disagree with you, Dave. As an Iowa guy who wants Iowa to do well, I do consider myself a fan. I think Coach Patterson considers himself a fan, but I think we both try to be as objective as possible. We both want this to be an anomaly and just a 1 week occurrence, and maybe you place all hope on that. But I know I'm not optimistic, but I get what you're saying. Based on this one game against an FCS opponent, regardless of caliber of FCS opponent, certainly this offense did not look. This offense looked as bad as it could.
Oh yeah, this is the worst I've ever seen you guys even play offensively in years, and you've had some pretty mediocre to bad offenses. But the big thing I've noticed is you had a couple wide receivers open on a couple plays, and your quarterback just stares at the tight end the whole entire time, just passes right at him. And I think even one of the interceptions happened where I think it was just staring right at the tight end, and they just cut it off and they got the interception. And it's look at your wide receivers, dude. They're wide open on some of these plays. I know the plays probably called for maybe the tight end, but this is a joke. I mean, your offensive line was not pushing it off the ball. Your running back barely got any room to get anything. It's just, if I'm an Iowa fan, I'm extremely worried and concerned about how you're going to be playing in Big Ten.
But Dave, hold on a second. Hold on a second, Dave. I understand you're approaching this as not a fan of Iowa, but I mean, we do have 350 people watching between our two channels right now, and I mean, there's not much positivity. I think the general consensus is people are worried. I think that's the whole point of this show. Not to berate you, but I think the overall consensus here is yes, there is reason for worry. I don't think anybody's denying that.
Yeah, I know that. I'm not trying to I can just, at least from being a non-fan, I can at least say you have one of the best punters, I think, in the nation.
True. Absolutely. One of the best defenses in the nation collectively.
Yeah. Great defense. Fast off the ball, goes right through the offensive line, makes the plays when they have to. The defensive backfield is covering the receivers well, making sure that nobody's open. Yeah, you have a great defense. But defense, it's going to break down against other plays, against other teams in the Big Ten, and that's just the fact. You're not going to be able to stop everybody in the Big Ten offensively. And well, I'm just saying, I know it's extreme. This should be an extreme. This should be very concerning for how bad this was. And hopefully they figure out something for Iowa State, because I do believe Iowa State will probably beat them.
Well, I appreciate the call, Dave, and we'll always enjoy your phone calls, and we'll just have to wait and see. Hopefully we'll see some improvement from weeks 1 to 2.
Okay. I will get off the line and make sure you get some other phone calls done.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call.
Okay.
Appreciate Minnesota Dave there, and I agree. It's great let's just say something positive for a second. Don, I want to thank you for being here as part of this show for the second straight year. It wouldn't be the same without you. Ryan Barton brings up a good point, and I mentioned it before we even got on the air, or before you got on the air. And to our caller who just called in, I'm going to put you on hold, so just hang tight. He says the coaching staff made the decision to not find a QB solution in the transfer portal. And for the record, I always feel like I need to preface when I bring this subject up, I feel like I need to preface it by saying I'm not by any means attributing all the issues to Spencer Petras, but this is absolutely a critical miss. And it was a critical miss when it happened. And I talked about it, Don, and I think you talked about it. We both agreed that it was something to really look strongly at. And I saw, Casey Thompson in Nebraska. Nebraska's a train wreck. They don't know how to win close games, but I thought Casey Thompson was really good against a good Northwestern defense. We saw Connor Bazelak play really well his first year in the Indiana offense last night against a Big Ten opponent. We see Jaden Delora. Somebody commented here that I can give you his stats right now. He's 16 of 23 for $170 and 3 touchdowns for Arizona against a decent San Diego State program. And again, just one game, I get it, but there were lots of options out there, and Iowa chose to pass on those options. And those people who said it's not worth bringing in a quarterback and losing chemistry, and what happens if Spencer decides to transfer out or Alex Padilla tries to transfer out? I said it at the time, I'll say it again. If people if they're scared of competition, then they can leave. That's my feeling on it. They can leave if that's their right. And look, I mean, there were so many options out there. I do believe, even though you may say, well, Iowa's offense is so ugly, why would anybody want to come here? My response to that is part of the reason it's ugly is because of quarterback play. And I'm not attacking Spencer specifically, but that's just, there's more to the quarterback room than just Spencer Petras, right? I mean, there's a lot to this, and I just go back to the spring. It's a fair point, and it's disappointing. Let's get to our next caller here. We'll start with John, who joins us remotely. John, how you doing this morning or this afternoon, and is there hope for the Iowa offense?
Well, I don't know if there's hope for the Iowa offense. I ran across a video, I don't know, a couple of days ago, Brian Ferentz explaining we're doing a clinic on a play. And one thing he said was, on a play, you have to start from the start when you're teaching it. And I think that comes down to our offense, too. We have to start with the start. Kirk Ferentz is a great human being. There's no question about it. But he does not have an offensive mind. And I don't see him looking at anybody for an offensive mind. And everybody's talking about the offensive line got blown up today. And they did. But it's hard to block 8 with 5. When you have linebackers and safeties whose first 2 steps on the snap are to the ball, that puts your offensive line in a big, big crack. How do you block them? That's why our running game, people are basically saying, we're going to sell out on the run because we're going to make this bet. You're not going to throw the ball. And even if you do, you're not going to try to go over the top. The worst you're going to do is gash us for 15, maybe 20 yards. And then you're going to go back to the run. And we're betting that on a long field, you can't do it.
Don, your response to that?
Well, I do think that the teams that are the most successful are those that are capable of attacking a defense the full width of the field and deep downfield too. That should be part of your job on offense, is to scare the other team deep.
Right.
And frankly, if you don't scare them deep, it's going to be hard to throw a lot of those intermediate routes. You know, you have to be a threat to try to beat them over the top.
Right.
And if you don't try to do it very often, then obviously they may not feel so threatened.
But if you look at the game again, go back and watch. I know you're not going to watch the whole game again, but I don't know that there was an offensive. Well, you might, but everybody else might not. There might have been 2, maybe 3 plays that we ran where the safeties started backpedaling at the snap. And when you have a defense playing downhill like that, you have to have a superb offensive line to be able to run the football. Now, put on top of that, when you miss open wide receivers, then the fear of the pass lead, and you said defend the whole field. We're making teams defend 55 yards wide, but only 20 deep, no matter where we are on the field. And your offensive line can't live that way. They're going to get crushed.
Well, to be honest, we're not consistently requiring them to defend the width of the field either.
Well, that's true. That's true.
It's not 55; it's 53 1/3. But I know I'm splitting hairs. 160 feet wide. I wish one of the plays that was good for us today was the fly sweep. I think we only ran one. I think was there another one, Corey? I'm not sure there was. I think that was it.
Let me just admit something real quick, and this is just an aside. As bad as the offense was today, my internet went out in the third quarter, and I actually had to move to a friend's house. So I'm not even home right now. I missed part of the third quarter. I missed the first safety from Jack Campbell, and all of a sudden I said, 5-3. So yeah, I just
that's all you missed.
There could have been another one.
And I guess I don't want to stay on here the whole time. The one thing I want to say about Kirk Ferentz, I'm 57 years old. I've been watching Iowa football for 40 years. In the 20 years plus that Kirk has been here, I cannot remember a player who lost his spot during the season based on poor performance.
Well, I think that's probably not quite accurate, John. And I mean, certainly there are times.
Can you think of one? A skill player. Let me buy a skill player.
I'd have to recall. It's been 14 years ago, but what happened in 2008 with Jake Christensen and Ricky Stanzi?
And Ricky Stanzi. Okay, all right, that's one. All right, I'll give you that one.
Oh, it's a pretty big one. That's a pretty big one.
Right, and it worked out, but he hasn't done it since. My point is, bring in another quarterback and let's see what he does. Anybody can throw the ball into the ground. Give another guy a chance to do something. You know what? You said when the lights come on, Spencer Petras seems to shrink a little bit. And that may be true. That happens to players. And maybe the opposite is true for Padilla. Maybe he's, okay in practice, but maybe when the lights go on, he's a player. I mean,
what
do we have to lose at this point?
I thought he showed flashes last year, but I think we can all admit, John, that Alex Padilla was not great last year.
Oh no, absolutely not. Nope, not at all.
But he does bring he does bring mobility. He does bring experience. He's an older guy too. I mean, he's not much younger than Spencer. And I think the argument for Joey Labus is he's even more mobile. And from what the reports out of spring practice were that he's fearless. And, he's had over a year to learn the offense. And I have said this over and over again. If he doesn't know the offense by now, then we have major issues with our philosophy and our playbook.
And the point is, the last point I'll make and let people go on.
Sure.
Spencer's been in this program 4 years or 5?
4.
Either way, he's not going to get any better. This is as good as he's going to get. And it's not good enough. So we have to look for an answer. You just have to.
I appreciate the phone call, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Like I said, callers are bringing it, Don. Just anything to say before we get to our next caller?
Well, talking about transfer portal, frankly, based on the way that the two quarterbacks played last fall, I don't see how they would be offended if we would have brought in another quarterback. And if they were offended,
Don, who cares?
Explain to them,
who cares?
We need better production at quarterback. That's why we're bringing a guy in.
If they were, listen, we wouldn't have to do it if they played better.
Correct.
So who cares if they're offended? This is, I mean,
if they're offended, then they're obviously part of the problem.
Correct.
Don't be offended. If you want to use it as motivation to play better and keep your job, that's fine. Sometimes transfer portal guys do not win the job. But if they don't win the job, it's because somebody elevated their game that was already there.
Right.
One way or the other, we need better production at that position.
Absolutely. Let's get to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Hey, this is Jake.
Hey, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you? Just a couple of things. I might be out of line with everyone else here today, but I might defend Brian a little bit today.
Okay.
I don't think there was much he could have done in that second half. I mean, the ball was either going into the stands in the dirt or it was getting forced into like triple coverage. I think he was just trying to bleed that clock.
Don?
Well, that doesn't explain why we didn't take shots over the top of the defense. Try to do that at some point in time.
I don't disagree with you there. I just mean in the second half, it kind of felt like Spencer was trying to throw an interception there. He gets locked in on those tight ends in the middle of the field, and he's going to throw the ball, whether they're open or not, seemingly.
Well, I've said this a long time. I said this, I had Tony Rassiopi on the show, Don. I know you watched that show when I had Rassiopi on the show during the summer, and he didn't think that was a problem. I asked him specifically, do you feel like sometimes Spencer locks in on a receiver and doesn't really read the field in the moment? And his response was, well, I can't really comment on it because I'm not calling plays and I'm not seeing what Spencer's seeing. So it kind of deflected the question, which is fine. I understand what he was saying, but I agree with our caller. I mean, I do feel like that's been an issue. We saw at least once or twice in this game. One of them was even completed where Spencer forced the ball into double coverage and actually made the throw. But there's no way you're telling me that was the best option on the field. I don't know if it's a matter of, he's seeing, when you get so much pressure early in a game like this, and when it gets a game where, they may have expected to be able to protect Spencer pretty well, given the fact that, even though South Dakota State's defensive line wasn't real young, it was an older line, but it wasn't perceived to be the strength of that team. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of surprised Spencer Petras with the amount of pressure and that pocket collapsing early. And that gets in the quarterback's head after a while, doesn't it?
It certainly surprised me. There were more people in our backfield than what I expected.
Well, I think if you look at the last couple of years, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you bring pressure on Iowa, and the chances of a turnover or just in bad play in general it increases.
You're right.
I would say as Iowa fans, we ought to buckle in, though, just in the last thing here, but because I don't think there's an answer on this roster. I know we can argue about, the freshmen, the backups, whatever. I have to believe that if somebody was better than Petras, they would be playing, because if not, that's just crazy, right? So I don't think there's an answer, and obviously I don't think the offense is going to change, so I don't think we're going to see last year's 10 wins, but we may see the opposite record just with the same result.
Well, I can't argue with you at this point. I'm not going to agree with you. I don't think it's going to spiral to 2-10, but I understand the frustration. I understand the mindset. The good news is, caller, if there's anything there's reason for optimism, is it's not murderer's row in September. So if you can survive and get better each week, you've got a chance with this defense and special teams unit to still be a good football team. Is that true, Don? Is that fair?
That's a true statement. Yeah, there's no reason to panic. We simply have to be better next week than we were this week, and then better still the week after and the week after that. So we have a chance to be a lot different in October than we are in early September. And that's got to be our goal, is to get that done.
No, I don't disagree there. I just think that we should be careful because it looks dangerously similar to last year as far as the performance on the field. And that's a lot of the same tape. And I'm not a coach, but, Don, you were a head coach. What would you, if you saw this tape and you were playing Iowa next week, what would you and your defensive staff be saying if you were at the Power 5 level with Power 5 talent?
Well, I think I'd be pretty confident going into the game because it looks to me like they're going to have a hard time staying ahead of the chains. If you're behind the chains on second and third downs, it's hard to win football games unless you have a lot of big playability, and we haven't shown that we've got that. As Corey knows, we were 12th in the Big Ten last year making big plays. And as I've discussed before, Corey, part of making big plays is trying to make big plays. You got to try. And I would hope that we would try more this year than what we tried a year ago. You need to fabricate big plays if you can. One way or the other, you need to make them. And if it's not coming in a natural sense, just by your normal play calling, then you maybe need to spice up the offense. And don't be apologetic if you're running a trick play, because if that trick play works, it might be the difference in the game.
And last thing I'll leave you guys with here is I think we probably missed Keegan Johnson a little more than we would have thought today with the over-the-top speed. I just don't know if we had anybody that could really get behind the defense today with, the fullback playing tight end and having 3 tight ends out there. And Arlen Bruce is a good wide receiver, but I'm not sure if he's the beat you down the seam kind of wide receiver. But thanks, guys.
Appreciate the call, sir. Good points. Again, we've had great calls throughout the day. I do want to get to the super chats. So I'm people who keep saying I'm skipping super chats. I'm not skipping super chats. It's just, you got a million comments in here from 2 different channels. We're just trying to get things in order. We got people calling in, people on hold. We got someone and hold in the queue here. So let's get through the super chats. Do appreciate everybody who's thrown in a super chat. You can certainly sponsor Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Excellent way to grow your business. And if you're looking to expand here, not only in the state of Iowa, we know Hawkeye fans are everywhere. You can certainly reach out. Email from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. It's on the bottom of the screen. From the eye of the storm at outlook.com to sponsor Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. The Real Hayden says, Corey, do you remember when you said all summer to Mark Rogers that the offense can only get better this year? LOL, it's not better. Well, it's one game. And I think the offense will be better overall because just numbers wise, it's going to be better. Now, it could just be, maybe it'll be 117 out of 130, Don. I could be wrong. And maybe it's going to be 127 out of 130. Then I'll have been wrong, but it's hard to be worse than 123 out of 130. Let's not forget the struggles last year.
Well, one of the things I always used to tell my coaches, Corey, whether we won or lost the previous game, it would be smart on our part to react, but not overreact.
Yeah.
So you react to what just happened, how the game was played out, but they're thoughtful reactions. So you examine how can we get more production on offense? How can we be more secure with the ball? What steps are logical that we would take? And you got to be sure you don't overreact. To react is the right thing to do, but not to overreact. To overreact can simply add to the problems that you already have.
So thank you to the Real Hayden for that question and the super chat. Joseph, I was not ignoring you, Joseph. 2 things. Send this to Coach Patterson. I will do that. To repay him for the time lost watching that Iowa offense. And 2, Coach P, why does Kirk Ferentz hate mobile quarterbacks like Brad Banks? Let me rephrase that. I don't think that's necessarily totally fair because he did play Brad Banks, but I understand where the question is coming from. It does seem like Iowa prefers statuesque quarterbacks, Don. How can you best answer that question, though? You understand what Joseph's frustration is.
Yes, I do. I like mobile quarterbacks. I like guys that can run and throw. The direction the NFL is headed, you don't see too many Johnny Unitas type guys anymore. I think back to the guy from Buffalo is a good example, who Iowa played against, right, when he was in college. Isn't that true? Josh Allen.
Yeah.
He's a runner and a passer.
Yes, he
and
is.
of course, I like the guy from the Chiefs, and even Aaron Rodgers is a fairly capable runner.
Absolutely.
So you need to be. And here's the other thing. I'll make this point. Something for Spencer to think about. People commented, well, he's not very mobile. Okay, one of the things you need to do then, you need to be able to stand in there and throw the ball, even though you are running out of time. And I'll give you a specific example of a guy that did it and made a living in the NFL doing it. He played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He wasn't very mobile either, but one thing for sure, he was as tough as any of those other players.
He was.
And he stood in there and he threw the ball and he took one on the chin every now and then, but that's just part of the game. If you can't escape the pocket, then you need to be prepared to take a few hits, because the ball sometimes has to come out really, really late. It is a matter of a hundredth of a second sometimes. And if you just barely get the ball out, of course, that means you are going to take a few hits. And part of the game is being tough enough. One of the things you want to do as a quarterback, you're not physically tough in the same way that a middle linebacker is tough, but you need to demonstrate these hits aren't going to bother me. I'm going to get up every time, and I'm not going to be nervous about the next hit, because I recognize it's part of the game. My job is to stand in there and throw the ball, and sometimes take a hit a split second after I let it go.
Well, again, thank you to Joseph for the super chat.
Another example of Lake Corey I'll touch on. You do remember the play. There was a play in which our quarterback flushed. It was a third down play, incidentally. And because my wife said, I know what you're going to say if you were coaching Spencer after he came to the bench. Spencer, that was third down. Congratulations, when you flushed, you forgot to become a running back.
Yes, he did.
It's not an option to slide for a gain of 1. You need 5 yards. Go get 5 yards. And that doesn't mean you're going to try to be someone other than who you are, but that means you're going to carry your pads in a really low way. You're going to make one cut maybe, but no more than one, that's for sure. And you're going to turn your shoulder pads so that you're able to knife your way downfield and avoid that hit that stands you up. And I'm sorry, that's just part of the game. Don't take it. Don't slide on 3rd and 5 if you're only going to gain 1 with your slide. Obviously, that's not nearly enough.
And Don, I could say this, but that was like one of the few times we see Iowa quarterbacks demonstrate the ability to slide. That's one thing I wish Iowa quarterbacks did more, but you're right, that was not the right time to do it. Jack says, Don, what can we do to improve our line play, and would switching to a power scheme from the zone simplify our line play and make us better? Well, there's no way you do that mid-season, Don. That's a total overhaul, isn't it?
It's not hard to have what we call zone concepts and gap concepts. You can have both. And I don't doubt that we do run some power. There's a misdirection play referred to as humble, or what did they used to call it, counter tray. You've heard that term maybe. It's a misdirection in the backfield, and it's both a guard and a tackle pulling across the formation. I don't know that we ran a rumble today. I suspect we probably did somewhere during the day. But you can have concepts that are in both zone and gap schemes. You can do that. You can teach both. And I don't doubt that we do teach both. You could argue maybe we need more power and less zone. I'm not sure about that, because it still gets down to whether or not you can move defenders off the line of scrimmage and create seams. And if you're not creating seams, then it's going to be hard for a back to find a place to run. I thought both backs, incidentally, ran hard. I'm talking about our back and their back. I thought they ran hard and made some people miss. I give a lot of credit to both defensive fronts. They were both difficult to run against. And you could blame the offensive lines on both sides, but I prefer to give some credit to both defenses too. I think both fronts were pretty stout.
Absolutely. And Luke was waiting on hold for a long time. Luke, come back if you. We were about to get to your call, and I apologize for the long wait, but you're certainly welcome to come back. We're trying to wrap this up in the next 10 to 15 minutes. We've been on for about 2 hours. Coach Patterson's been gracious enough to give us an hour of his time, but I do want to get to just the last couple things. Before we got Patrick on hold. Pete super chat. He says, Corey, have you ever considered radio or TV sports? I think it would be great. Thank you, Pete. Very kind comment. But I have done my share in radio and chose to pursue other opportunities. So, but I appreciate that, and I hope you're enjoying the show. Sounds like you are. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the super chat. Excuse me. And then Kenneth says, Coach Don, when a head coach hears booing and the quarterback isn't playing good, is it stubbornness on the coach's part for not changing, or does he really believe in the kid? Is there any tendency, you think, from a head coach? I'm not saying Kirk was this way today, but is there any tendency to resist making a move just because the natural inclination is to kind of resent the fan base for booing?
I think Kirk would simply make a sound decision whether there was booing or not. It'd be the same thought process. Are we better off playing Padilla at this point in the game? Or are we better off staying with Petrus? And I don't think he would put any stock at all into what the crowd reaction was, because he would recognize, as we've discussed before, sometimes the crowd blames one player more than anyone else, and it's not always fair that that's who gets the blame.
Right. And then one more thing before we get to Luke and then Patrick. Matt says, think Bud Meyer will help Brian with play calling moving forward. He can't, Don. That's the problem. He's not, by rule, he's not allowed to. Doesn't matter if he's a paid analyst now or not. He's not allowed to. So I'll answer that question, Matt. Not saying it's a bad question because he did it at Colorado State, but he's not allowed to do that.
Yeah, let me qualify your answer there, Corey. You've heard me say before, part of the preparation for Saturday is what's done during the week. So in game planning, certainly Bud Meyer could have an effect on our plan, whatever our plan might be. Obviously, when the game starts, I don't know that he's any assist at all. I don't know what involvement he has during the game. He's an analyst. He's not a full-time coach. So I don't know how he's positioned to contribute at all on Saturday. I'm not sure.
All right, and let's get to Luke. It doesn't look like your device is connected. Try to get your mic figured out because we'd love to have you on the show. Try to get that maybe. Okay, now it looks like you're on. Luke, can you hear us?
Yes. Hey, this is Luke Wickham in Orlando. Hey, you guys have a great show, and with Coach Patterson, he's got great intel, and it's very honest, and it's just a dream for Hawkeyes. And then I know during basketball season you have Gary Close and a lot of good guests. So thank you, Corey, for doing this. So for us Hawkeye fanatics, we really appreciate it, and thank you, Coach Patterson, for doing this because it is very helpful for Hawkeye fanatics.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so I think, you got to look at the positives. Obviously, today was ugly, but winning ugly. And the offense was, really terrible. But you won, and you're 1-0. Last year, you won 10 wins. If you beat Kentucky in Orlando, you won 11 games. Nebraska won 3 games last year. 3 games. So Iowa fans are pretty spoiled. I mean, before Hayden Fry and Coach Patterson came into town, Iowa didn't win much. And we've won a lot lately. It seems like every year we win at least 8 games. So we're very lucky. I think Spencer's probably the best quarterback on the team. He's not very good, but he's the best quarterback in the team. We saw Alex play last year. Unless he's gotten a lot better over the last year, he wasn't that great last year. He's much more mobile, which could help. The question is, and for Corey and Coach Patterson is the third string. I've never seen him play. Obviously, he's what I've read about him. He's a really good athlete, and the coaching staff's thing. But I would like to get, if we do eventually get up, get him some minutes for some experience next year, because I don't think Spencer's your guy to, win a Big Ten title. But he's solid, and I don't think Alex is really that solid either. But looking to the future, maybe Joey is. But I'd just be interesting on your commentary.
Well, just say this before we throw it over to Don. Let's just remember this. If Spencer doesn't come back in 2023, and I don't think he will, Don, I wish the best for Spencer moving forward. I don't think he's coming back in 23. That's my prediction, early prediction. But the future at quarterback is more mobile. I mean, besides Carson May, who's a 4-star guy, and he's a 6'5", 4-star guy, you've got Joey Labus, who's a young guy. You got Alex Padilla, who's got another year at least. And then you have Marco Lainez, who plays a lot. And I know it's going to tickle the ears of fans. I've made the comparison. He actually said he looked up to Brad Banks, and he kind of plays like him a bit. Now, certainly that's a high task or a high act to follow. But I do think they're going to have an opportunity to have more mobile candidates, Don.
Yeah, I think you're right. Incidentally, talking about Joey Labus, I was at practice this week, and I'd never really talked to Joey before. So as he came off the field, I said hi to a lot of players, but he's one I really didn't know very well at all. So I reminded Joey that I used to coach quarterbacks here, and I said, I know as the third quarterback, the right approach you have to take, Joey, even in game one, is the mindset that you're 2 plays away from being in the game. And I know that sounds extreme, that the starter and the backup might be injured on consecutive plays, but the good Iowa fans might recall there was a year where we played 5 quarterbacks because of injury. Now, it doesn't happen very often, and we pride ourselves, of course, in protecting our quarterbacks. But I did remind Joey after he acknowledged, that's a good approach, Coach. I'm going to take that approach, that I have to be ready in the event of injury. I have to be ready to play on short notice. And I reminded him of one other thing. I said, remember this, Joey, you have talents that maybe give you an advantage over those 2 more experienced quarterbacks. Don't forget that your mobility does count for a lot because there are some plays you can run better than the other guys, and never lose sight of the fact that you have a good set of skills to bring to that position. So don't get discouraged just because you're third. Just keep preparing for each and every game because the opportunity is going to come either sooner or later. And I just hope he's ready for that opportunity when it presents itself.
Caller, I'm gonna put you on hold, caller. Appreciate you calling in. Anything else, Luke?
No, just thank you, and that's great intel. You're right. I mean, 3rd string quarterback in the Big Ten. It's a long season. It's very physical. Look how many injuries were there today for the opponent. Joey could be there in any time, but my message would be go Hawks. 1-0, 10 wins last year. We're very lucky, and the season's bright.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate the call, and always good to have perspective. We're finishing up with the last couple of calls. If you didn't get called in, I want to let everybody know I'm gonna be going live on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Central Time for a live edition of Hawkeye Hangout right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So you can certainly call in Wednesday night. We can't get to everybody's calls. Appreciate everybody being interactive. I'm doing my best to try to manage everything. We don't have a producer behind the scenes. Lemansky says, Coach Don and Corey, you made our Hawkeye Saturday better. Don't look backward. We aren't going that way. Thank you for the super chat, Lemansky. And Patrick is on the line waiting patiently. Thank you for tuning in, Patrick. What you got for P and I? Hawkeye Saturday better. Don't look backward. We aren't going that way. Thank you for the super chat, Patrick. Lemansky, and I hear myself on the line waiting patiently. Hello. Thank you for tuning in, Patrick. What you got for P and I?
Yes, I must say that I was very disappointed in the offensive line. I thought we'd see improvement this year, and I certainly didn't see that. And Spencer didn't have a whole lot of time, like the coach has mentioned. But I also wonder if he seems to be slow on his decision making, and I don't know if his peripheral vision is that terrific either. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I kept hoping for a draw play with that rush, and I'd like to get the coach's opinion on that because of that fantastic rush they had on us. I kept hoping for a draw play, and we finally called one. And we got, 7 or 8 yards or 9 yards in that play, and that's all I've got.
I think maybe it was 3rd and 15 when we called it. It was still not nearly enough yardage, but you're right. Draw plays do slow down pass rush. That should be one way to discourage pass rushes to be effective with draw plays. You're exactly right. I think maybe it was 3rd and 15 when we called it. It was still not nearly enough yardage.
Anything else, Patrick?
Draw plays do slow down pass rush. That should be one way to discourage pass rushes to be effective with draw plays. You're exactly right.
Appreciate the call, Patrick. Thank you, sir. I think he's a little bit behind. I could hear the echoing in the background. And then last comment from Joby. I'm getting on late today. You probably answered the question already. Are the 3 skilled position starters who are injured today going to play versus ISU? Gavin Williams, Keegan Johnson, Nico Reganey. I don't believe Reganey is. No idea on Gavin or Keegan Johnson. But you hope it makes a difference. But, boy, they got to get better up front, Don. And, this show goes by so fast. I've been on for 2 hours. You joined us over an hour ago. Let me get this banner off so that we can actually have a conversation. I guess my point is I don't know. I look at this and I think there's so much to fix from one game, but at the same time, you take it from a coaching perspective. You don't throw your hands up in the air and say the season's down the drain. You are 1-0. That is a fact. You are 1-0. You got the job done. And I recall a game in 2009 against UNI where Iowa needed 2 blocked field goals in the final seconds of that game. They came back and won the Orange Bowl at 11-2, had a chance to win the Big Ten that year, and that was an FCS UNI team. And I would venture to say this is a better program at South Dakota State than that UNI program was, even though that's a respectable Panthers unit. So, Don, we didn't get to everything. It's impossible to get to everything in a couple of hours, but anything else to add before we go off the air?
Yeah, thank you for giving me that chance, Corey. Yeah, I got something to add just to maybe set the right optimistic tone going forward. This much you are very familiar with, Corey. You're familiar with the term positive exception and negative exception. And I don't know that all the listeners understand what that is, but think of it this way. There are some teams, when the football game's played out, that find a way to win the game, even though statistically maybe they didn't really deserve it. Maybe their execution wasn't what you wanted it to be, and yet they still found a way to win. Prime example last night was Indiana. I would say Illinois, I'm pretty sure had better numbers, and yet Indiana found a way to win the game. Last year in the Big Ten, the team that was best at that was Michigan State, as you know. But the second best team in the Big Ten at finding a way to win was the Iowa Hawkeyes. And that's not any surprise to me because we've always been good at finding ways to win. Other teams find ways to lose. No secret to you, Corey. The team that led the league last year in finding ways to lose was Nebraska. Penn State was next to them. Penn State has talent. Penn State found ways to lose. Our history in recent years and our history, even when Coach Fry was here, is that we are more likely to find ways to win a game than to find ways to lose a game. And that's the reason for optimism going forward. These coaches and players know how to find ways to win. And don't be surprised if we sneak it up a little bit the way the game gets played, and yet we somehow found a way to end up with more points. And that, after all, is the ultimate requirement for being a good football team, is finding a way to score more than the other team.
And I apologize to our caller who hung up. I wanted to answer your call, so I apologize that you hung up. I was going to get one more call in before we ended the show. I was not trying to ignore you. I know you were on hold, and I do appreciate people being patient today and waiting on hold. I do want to let everybody know that one more thing before we go. Every Tuesday, I'm live with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, for Iowa Live, Iowa Hawkeyes Live, 4:30 p.m. Central Time on the other channel. So if you may be listening on this channel, actually, we're dual broadcasting this. Iowa football at the voice of college football will be there on what day would that be? I'm already forgetting my days. On Tuesday at 4:30 for, again, Iowa Live with the one and only Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Also, on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central Time, I plan on being here for Hawkeye Hangout, and we'll be taking calls, taking chats, and hopefully previewing what we hope to be an Iowa State win over Iowa State. I do want to mention one more thing before we go. Let me see if I can throw this banner. I should have had this ready prior. Maybe I cannot. Let's see. Don, any good food? I mean, while I'm doing this, any good food at the game today?
Not that I'm aware of. I never eat in the stadium. I'm always amazed that people decide to get up and get a hot dog and they end up missing at least 10 minutes of the game, 10 minutes off the game clock, I'm saying. Those lines are long. I know Lisa commented she went up to refill the water bottle that she brought with her, and she said, oh, my gosh, I thought about getting a soft drink, but there were 100 people in line, and I was going to miss half the game if I formed at the back of that line, so she didn't do it. But I had an extra serving of oatmeal this morning, and that's going to have to work for me until we have dinner tonight.
All right, folks. Reminder: every single week I am here, and most weeks Coach Patterson will join us live after the game. In other weeks, he'll join us maybe later in the weekend. Don is here, gracious enough to give us his time. Live after every Iowa football game, it's Iowa Postgame featuring Coach Don Patterson. You can call in, you can chat, you can even join by video now. So, Don Patterson, appreciate the time as always, sir. And let's talk about a victory next week against the Cyclones. Hopefully, we'll be talking about 2-0 and a much improved offense from weeks 1 to week 2.
Absolutely. We still have that support of all those Kinnick fans, and that's a big advantage to the home team.
Absolutely. Folks, we'll see you Tuesday at the Iowa channel with Mark Rogers at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. I'll be live with a call-in show Wednesday from the Hawkeye of the Storm. This show will be available sometime this weekend. It takes a while to post, but we'll be getting this show available for audio podcast listeners. Please subscribe to both channels. Please hit that like button on your way out. That helps. Please share the show on social media. If you want to sponsor Iowa Postgame with Don Patterson, you can do that as well. There's also links in the description to donate. If you want to sponsor the show, though, from the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. That's from the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. Iowa is 1-0 with the victory over South Dakota State 7-3. We'll talk to you soon.